adding more to the debt, borrowing more. And here's what's even... Now, I'm going to go straight to this. Now, you might say, well, you know what? You just don't understand this. You know what? You're a social worker. So what? You got ChatGPT. Yeah, you did a little bit in regards to stock trading, so you know a little bit. But this is way out of your league, bro. You're just a lefter and you're mad that the bill passed. No. I'm going to give you Warren Buffett, the GOAT. He's a billionaire, by the way. This is him speaking to the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick $16 million off of their health insurance? But increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Boom! Mic drop. That's why he's the Oracle of Omaha. I don't know if he still eats at McDonald's, but if he does, incredible. Yeah, he's a billionaire and he eats at McDonald's. Because he didn't let the money, change him. It's possible. Very hard. Incredible how much he gives. You can look. Hardly gets any press attention. How much philanthropy he gives. I mean, the amount he's going to give when he dies, it's incredible. And here he is, asking a very plain question. You know what? If you're really concerned about the national debt, why are you kicking $16 million off of health insurance and cutting taxes for billionaires? It's a rhetorical question. The point is, no, you don't care about the debt. Again, if we did care about the debt, we would be raising the tax rate, the top marginal tax rate, back to 50% as it was when President Ronald Reagan was in office, and cut it from 70 to 50% and increased the corporate tax rate back to 34%. What makes this even more alarming and concerning is remember, these budget numbers are with, how much our GDP is going to be. Our gross domestic product. The GDP. The size of our economy. Now, we talked about this in another podcast. It had shrank the first quarter by 0.3%. I mean, it didn't grow. We were supposed to grow 0.5%, I think. No, excuse me. Yes, we were supposed to grow 0.5%. Something around there. Because we were scheduled. They had economists have put us at growing, the GDP growing by 2.1% or something. Maybe it was 2.4. I don't remember. But you get the point. The point is that we were supposed to grow about 0.5% every quarter to make it to 2%. We shrank. At that time, it was we shrank by 0.3%. But now they've done because sometimes they go back and they recalculate, they go ahead and look at the numbers again. We actually shrank by 0.5%, even worse in the first quarter. And the second quarter numbers are coming out at the end of July for the second quarter. It's going to be really interesting. And here's why I bring it up to you. Because the Congressional Budget Office has said that this bill alone is going to add another $3 trillion to the debt. But that's if we meet a 1.9% GDP. If we meet that forecast. It sure as heck doesn't look like it. The Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia is saying we're going to be at 1.4%. Another organization, the OECD, I don't know what it stands for, doesn't matter. Some government organization, this is what they do. They're saying 1.6. I told you when I first found out that we shrank at 0.3%, that even at our best, we were probably going to finish at 1.5. So I'm not far off. That means we're actually going to add more to the debt. Because why? We won't have more revenue. Let me put it to you another way. You have a budget of $100,000. One of them is through your primary job, where you make $80,000. The other is with your secondary job, where you make $20,000. Say you lose your secondary job. All of a sudden, you only have $80,000 now. But your bills have all stayed the same. You understand? If we were supposed to be at 2.1%, forget the number 2.1%. Put whatever you want on it. It actually represents like trillions of dollars. Let's just say 1 trillion is what 2.1% is. But now we actually only get to 1.5. Well, what does that mean? You could do simple math. You could figure it out. That means 0.5% is gone of the 1 trillion. Understand? 2.1% actually equals 1 trillion, but we only got 1.5%. Well, what's that number? I don't know. Calculate it. Ask ChatGPT. So that means what? We're going to have to borrow more. Well, go back to your example, to the example I gave you. You're at 80,000. You lost the 20,000 that you were counting on, but your bills and expenses are still the same. What are you going to do? You're going to use your credit card. But the problem is, you eventually pay off your credit card. This is not, we don't have a way to pay this off. It's not looking good. The Fed has said we're on an unsustainable path. And instead of Republicans getting serious about it, they just passed a bill that makes it even more unsustainable. It looks as if they're wanting to bankrupt us. And why would they care? If they're all going to be millionaires when they get out. And the people they cut the taxes for are already, they're like, we talked about it in another podcast. I forget how much their wealth had grown. Their net worth had grown by like 140% or something. I'll get you the numbers next week. But all you need to know is that they're getting wealthier. So why would they care if we go ahead and default? And then they say, oh, guess what? We need more money to make up for the debt and this deficit. Guess we can't pay Social Security. Or I guess what? This is how it starts. I guess those, younger people aren't going to get Social Security anymore. Or only Generation X now gets Social Security. Millennials and Gen X, you lose it. That's how it happens. And we very well know Republicans, unless they're moderates, don't give a damn about Social Security or Medicare. If they did, they just wouldn't have kicked $17 million off of Medicaid. They're coming for your money. It's your money. You've paid into it. You have paid into it your whole life. It's going to be there for you. You know what's great about Social Security? And you know I talk big about the stock market. I do. I'm not a financial advisor. And if you know that, I'm not a financial advisor, and I say do your own research and due diligence, but you still want my advice, and I have people who still come to me for advice. Well, specifically one person who comes and talks to me for advice. And you just want to have sustainable growth. I can tell you how to do that. But you know what's great about Social Security? You don't have to worry about some reckless president saying, I'm going to put tariffs on the world, and all of a sudden, the market goes into bear territory, and so does your portfolios, and your pensions, and your 401ks and 403bs. Because guess what? Social Security isn't tied to the market. It's there for you. It's an entitlement. It sounds like I have a tin hat. You know, when I used to hear people say that, I'm like, oh, I mean, I know they don't like it, but come on. But look at the numbers now. The numbers don't add up. And I'm going to be honest with you. I did some research today. And ChatGPT is fantastic. If you don't like it, you are like the people before who used to say, oh, I don't trust Google. And now everyone uses Google. Trust me, start using it. Not only is it going to make us more productive, it's more intelligent. It went ahead and told me on its own, because I was asking for information, and it provides you more information in a clear, concise format you can read. It told me the Congressional Budget Office is expecting our gross domestic product, our GDP, to go ahead, they're saying within this decade, to go ahead and decrease to like 1.8%. And you say, well, why does that matter? Let's go back to the number again. For us to be able to start paying down this debt, it needs to be way higher than 1.8%. We've talked about this in another podcast, the one that are driving us off a cliff. Our economy is not producing the amount it made, that it used to. And I know I didn't say that correctly right now because I haven't prepared for this part in this podcast that I'm talking about right now. I wish I could remember what I said in They're Driving Us Off a Cliff. But essentially, we are not producing. Our GDP is not as high as it used to be in the past. That's what I was trying to say. We're not producing as much revenue. Okay, I got it back. Sorry, I had an ADHD moment there. Now, there are multiple reasons why. I'm not going to go into them again. You can listen to that podcast, or maybe I'll do a quick summary in the next podcast. But our revenue, right, just like your own revenue, determines what we can pay for. We're not producing as much. Baby boomers are retiring. The wages haven't adjusted for productivity and inflation, meaning that there's less revenue because there's less taxable income, and productivity, meaning that we're not, it hasn't adjusted for productivity. Our wages haven't adjusted for productivity and inflation, meaning we're not getting paid as much. So what does that mean? Not only do we have less money to buy for the GDP, buy in the market, buy in the economy, but there's also less taxable income in regards to income tax, in regards to sales tax. I think I've kind of made sense now. It's dire. It's ominous. I mean, if our GDP, if we can't get it to 3%, we're going to have to find a way to go ahead and make up the difference, or they will come for your Social Security eventually. They will go ahead and come for it. And same for your Medicare as well. Believe it. The numbers don't add up. Not at these tax rates. Not at this Trump tax rate. We got to go back to when it was with Ronald Reagan. And my gosh, he's a Republican. Arguably the most famous Republican. I mean, besides Lincoln, obviously. Still bringing the heat. Moving on. No nice segue there. By the way, I'm out of my Monster. Can you tell I drink a Monster? I think so. So now that we're domestic, see, I always got to do a segue. It's just kind of the way I am. Now that we're on domestic and we're done with that horrible bill, I don't really know how to bring this up, to be honest with you. I guess this is the way I'll bring it up. Yeah, this is the way I'll bring it up. We've been talking about how you can actually have multiple parties in the United States. We said it's very difficult because it's not a parliamentary system. But you could run progressive candidates in safe districts, right? And in a different party. And, you know, if they won, fantastic. That means the voters of that constituency want a more progressive candidate. Fantastic. What's wrong with that? Nothing. Except, obviously, for the establishment party that doesn't want to lose the power in that constituency. Because, you know, they're power hungry. They don't want to lose influence. Hence, as we talked about in another podcast, why they ousted David Hogg out of the Democratic National Committee, the former vice chair. But getting back to the point about, because, you know, he wanted to, and it's sure he still does, he has a pack called Leaders We Deserve, wanting to run younger candidates against long-term incumbents, meaning long-term politicians, obviously in safe districts, but those who, you know, weren't performing as well. As he said, not effective. So, in New York City, they ran a grassroots campaign similar to the one that got Senator Bernie Sanders, into running for president. Of course, he wasn't elected, but everyone remembers that campaign in 2016. And also one that got Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez elected. Who was this person? It was in New York City. So, of course, a safe district, very blue state. I mean, my gosh, very blue city. I mean, it's deep blue here. And who was the winner? Zohran Mandani. And my gosh, this has brought up alarms everywhere. People are losing their minds over this. Because, you know, he says he's not a capitalist, I guess. He's part of the Democratic Socialists or something. Now, this wouldn't be a big deal in Europe, by the way. Because they have multiple parties. Oh, okay. You know. And to be honest with you, when he says he's a socialist, we have to be worried. He's not saying he's a communist. He's saying that, you know what, he wants to see more investment in social programs. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a capitalist. So, you know, we're not going to agree on everything. But you know what? It's also very interesting when you start talking about this. And I don't want to get too derailed on this. But there would be some people who would say, you know, some of the Scandinavian countries, where they provide a lot of safety net and social programs, they would say it's capitalism there. And it is. But of course, people here might say, well, they're not capitalists. So, you know, I guess to each your own how they want to define it. He beat Andrew Cuomo. And this is one of those examples I wanted to bring up. Now, Andrew Cuomo isn't a long-term incumbent. Andrew Cuomo is a sexual predator. And how in the heck the DNC wanted to run him again is beyond me. If you don't remember Andrew Cuomo, he is the person who had about 6 or 7 allegations of sexual harassment levied against him. It took a long time to get him out of office, but they finally did. He finally, I guess they were going to impeach him. I don't remember, you can look it up, but he eventually quit. So they ran him against Mandani, who obviously was, you know, in a grassroots campaign. He was appealing to what the voters wanted in New York City. And I mean, your choice was Andrew Cuomo. What were they going to do? Come on. Nothing against Zohran, by the way. I'm sure he won on his own merits. But I'm just saying, some Democrats came out and were like, how did this happen? You ran Cuomo, man. I mean, this is the problem with the Democratic Party. You wonder. Anyways, the reason why I bring this up is, no, let me say this. So, before I go into this other piece, which is very important, but one of the reasons why I bring this up is about how Democrats were losing their minds. Trump lost his mind, not surprisingly. Called Zohran a communist when he's not. And we're going to get to his inflammatory rhetoric in a minute. But I went ahead and posted this meme on my page. And it's the one with the Joker from The Dark Knight. And it says, a far-right politician wins in a red state. Nobody says anything. Zohran wins in a blue state, and everyone loses their damn minds. I mean, it's crazy to me. How many far-right red politicians win in deep red states, and we don't hear anything? But Zohran Mandami, am I saying it right? Mandani, yes, runs a grassroots campaign. Not even elected the mayor yet, by the way. Just won the Democratic nomination. And everybody is going crazy. Talk about hypocrisy. Nobody is like losing their minds when a far-right politician, say in West Virginia or in Alabama, wins. Trump went as far as to say that if Mandani does win, and he doesn't resign, or if he doesn't kowtow to President Trump, and he's the mayor of New York City, like, hello, man, different jurisdictions. I'm New York City, you're federal. But if he doesn't kowtow to Trump, if he doesn't bend the knee per se, Trump is going to go ahead and cut federal funding for New York City. And that to me is where he crossed the line. And you might say, my gosh, why do you take so long to go ahead and see what we've all seen? Because I want to be 100% sure. Because in today's day, it's hyperbolic. People just go ahead and say things left and right without even thinking. That's why. So I want to be sure today. I'm going to be honest with you. I used to be hyperbolic. I used to be inflammatory. And I'm not anymore. I'm diligent. I'm conscious. I'm mindful. I'm aware. I wait until I'm absolutely sure. And so, yeah, you might have said that Trump is authoritative. And yeah, you might have said, you know what, he's a dictator. Okay. Certainly looking that way. But now I'm going to say it because when you start threatening a city by cutting their funding because the constituents there go ahead and vote for a candidate they like, that's when you're acting like a dictator. You are going ahead and going against our most sacred and cherished right, besides free speech, is the right to vote. And you are punishing a deep blue area for for just nominating a candidate that's deep blue. And if New York City, which is a deep blue city, elects a deep blue candidate, you're going to cut funding. You're going to go against the right of those voters to choose who they want. That's called democracy, Donald! Democracy. And if you're not going to respect democracy, then what are you? You're a dictator. Now, the question is, will he do it? He could just be using dictator language. But now he's gotten past that point. Authoritative. And you might say, he's already done that. What took you so long? Okay, it took me a while. But I like to be sure. And when you start threatening our most sacred and treasured right, and it's not like I haven't sounded the alarm before, by the way, but I like to be balanced. I like to be balanced before I go ahead and, give judgment and jury. I like to be balanced. I like to be sure. I like to do my research. I like to watch for patterns. I like to see the whole story, the whole case. But when you go ahead and you start threatening a population because they used their sacred right of democracy, which allows them to vote and elect the candidate they want, that is when you cross the line of being into an authoritative figure like a dictator. That's what a dictator would do. He said we'll have to arrest him. He said he's going to strip his citizenship. That's all the words of a dictator, Donald. Where did you get that script from? From Kim Jong-un when you met with him? Or with Vladimir Putin? Or maybe with Netanyahu? Who's also facing corruption charges? Trying to dissolve the Supreme Court? Incredible. And yes, I've mentioned other things before, but this was such a, in regards to Donald Trump's conduct, as in regards to him being close or being, what's the word? Comfortable with authoritative figures in authoritative language. But I haven't come out and said, that's actually dictator behavior. That's authoritative behavior. Like clear cut, no way around it. When you start threatening people with cutting their funding, a city, an American city, with cutting their funding, because they use their right to vote and voted for the candidate they wanted, that's called authoritatism. That's called being authoritative, excuse me. That's called acting like a dictator. You wonder why Alexei Navalny never could run in Russia? But they have elections there. You got to be really careful. We're seeing some really alarming signs now. The world's on fire. By the way, just so you know that I'm balanced, I don't want to hear another Democrat yell about these ICE raids and how they're exceeding their authority unless they're willing to go ahead and grant amnesty to those undocumented immigrants who have been in this country for years, maybe decades. And you had 12 years worth of Democratic presidents and you did nothing. This is also on your hands. So ask them. Ask them straight up. What's your view? What's your position on granting amnesty to undocumented immigrants if we can't pass comprehensive immigration reform, which we won't be able to? And if they start to hem and haw, if they start to backpedal, just ignore them. All they're trying to do is to rile you up so you can vote for them. Remember, The last two presidents to grant amnesty to undocumented immigrants was President Ronald Reagan, a Republican, and President George Bush, a Republican. No Democrats done it yet. We're about to get to the funny stories. You say, why? You've taken all the joy from us today. I know. I apologize. I didn't mean to do that. And honestly, oh, there it is. I was like, I can't even find a funny story to give you. But I wanted to end with this last piece before we get to the funny stories. Which is, and this is very odd, and I don't really want to take up too much of your time with this, but this is my podcast, and I have to go ahead and bring you what's happening. Because it might happen to you. And, you know, the one tool we always have is information. Information's power. That's why freedom of speech is so important. So, as you know, I'm Muslim. And as you know, I've been watching the situation in the Middle East very closely. And, you know, I wanted to go ahead and not only receive posts from my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, but also those who are identified with the Gaza struggle and the struggle for Palestinians. By the way, just really quick, I'm for a two-state solution on both sides. FYI. There is no solution without a two-state solution. So don't come to me with saying Israel don't need a state either, because I ain't going to hear it. If you got a problem with that, go talk to the Arab Americans for Peace, who used to be the Arab Americans for Trump, before he decided he was going to make the Riviera of the Middle East and relocate Palestinians. They want a two-state solution. Talk to a lot of Arab countries, a lot of groups. They want a two-state solution. You don't want a two-state solution? Whether you're for Israel or Palestine, you're on the fringe. I don't care how impossible it is. When you tell me it's impossible, do you know what I'm going to tell you from now on? You're the reason why diplomacy is dying. Or, that's more of a gaslit way. I don't really want to do that. That's more of a boomer way. I apologize. Let me say it this way. If you come to me and say, it's impossible, I'm going to say you're believing the lie that diplomacy can't work. And that's why diplomacy is dying. That's a better way of saying it. There used to be a time where, you know, we didn't say things were impossible. We figured it out. So I became a part of these groups. And the minute I did, all of a sudden, Facebook started restricting the amount I could share to these groups, citing spam, even though I had not posted at all in any of these Muslim and Palestinian groups. And all that I wanted to post to them was how I think the 6 Arab countries that have ties with Israel should suspend or sever them, and how the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia should consider European alternatives for those Trump military and business contracts. Not only will it not let me post those posts to those groups, but it cites spam, even though I had never posted in those groups. I filed a complaint with CARE, which is a Muslim organization that looks into civil rights, And I've filed a complaint with the BBB. Now, I don't know, obviously. There's no way to really know. But it's just, you connect the dots, and it's just very odd. So I wanted to leave that with you. But that's why I have this podcast. I can go ahead and say it in another, get the news out, get the word out another way. And I really don't feel like doing these funny stories today. And you know what? I'm not. I'm not going to do these funny stories because, you know what? Today is not a funny day. We got a lot going on in the world. And you know what? We have these reckless leaders who apparently are in control and they can do whatever they want. And it's spilling the blood of innocents. And soldiers are going off to their wars dying and coming home with PTSD, trauma carrying to the families. Or they're going off in war and now kids are growing up without fathers. And you have all of these noble leaders speaking condemnations and taking no actions. So no, today is not going to be a funny story day. We're not going to go ahead and end it with levity. We have a Congress that doesn't seem to care about a burgeoning debt that's heading us straight to seemingly bankruptcy. And what that means for the younger generations, not just for me, but the younger generations behind me, younger than me. And I care. I care about their future. But, you wonder why I try to immigrate out of this country in 2023 in the summer. I write about it in my book, how I became homeless with a master's degree. It wasn't my intention, by the way, to become homeless. It was my intention to get to the UK, which, by the way, has its own alarming signs. And we'll talk about that in the next podcast. But at least in the United Kingdom, where they were proposing some draconian cuts, Labour, well, not all of Labour, which is a Democratic Party there, but the MPs there, which is like senators or, they're like elected officials there. Think about them as either Congress members or senators. A bunch of them stood up and said, no, we're not going to pass all these cuts just to go ahead and to take care of the debt. We'll find other ways. In other words, over there, they're not kicking 17 million people off of Medicaid. But there are alarming signs with Nigel Farage's UK Reform Party, which is like the MAGA equivalent over there. But that was one of the reasons why I was actually wanting to immigrate there. Besides, they have national health care, subsidized education or higher education, infrastructure for public transportation. A lot. And I don't know what the answers are. But I can sure and tell you that the people right now that are entrusted are not looking for solutions. They're looking for ways to continue to get reelected. And they want to go ahead and say the right thing to go ahead and get you behind them so they can get into office. Now, not all of them, but a majority of them. So it's really sad times. Diplomacy is dying and the world's on fire. And that is where we will leave it. Well, that's what happens when you don't get a weekly podcast. You get a longer podcast. 2 for the price of 1. 2 podcasts and 1 podcast. We'll break this one up as well as we did the last time. Thank you for listening to El Maestro. I had a great time, even though we dealt with some heavy topics. We will do the funny stories next week, or maybe earlier. I might do a midweek short podcast if we're going to have the interview next week, because I really want to get to this UK news, because there's a lot going on. So if that's the case, you will hear the funny stories then. And still, until then, stay lit.